When
Yeah.
lessons are rooted in fear, it is ineffective because you have the people who were me, who go to one side of the spectrum, who are afraid of everything. And then you go to the other side of the spectrum where people are like, oh, this is dangerous. Let me go and do this. Right. And that's just human nature. That's just who
Yeah.
we are as humans. If
Yeah.
we don't receive the correct guidance, we're going to continue to have these polarized experiences. And that's what is happening.
Welcome to another episode of Mental Health in the Age of the Metaverse. I'm your host, Christian Ulstrup. My guest today is Dr. Rachel Altvater. Rachel is an award-winning pioneering expert, leader, researcher, international trainer, author, and supervisor in the field of play therapy. She is a licensed psychologist in the Washington, D.C. area, and she holds national certifications as a registered play therapist, supervisor, and certified clinical trauma professional. She is an entrepreneur, the founder of Creative Psychological Health Services, president of the Maryland and DC Association for Play Therapy, and an editorial advisory board member for the International Journal of Play Therapy. Rachel published her research in the International Journal of Play Therapy on technology use in play therapy and is a contributing author in numerous scholarly texts on implementing digital technologies in play therapy practice. I couldn't imagine a better guest for this podcast. Rachel, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I can't wait to chat.
What is play therapy?
Yeah. So play therapy is a method of psychotherapy that is beneficial for all ages. It is typically referred to as a treatment for children and teens, but it is really for all ages. But ultimately, it's using an expressive medium of play to work through mental health struggles. So if we're talking about kids specifically, children often lack the verbal abilities to fully articulate and even understand what's going on. They know I don't feel quite right, but they don't necessarily know why they don't feel quite right or how to feel better. So play is a child's natural mode of communication. Play allows a child to really utilize their native language, their origin language, to express and make sense of and resolve some of their internal difficulties or some of the discomfort that they're experiencing externally. So that's a little nutshell of play therapy, but one of the biggest things that play therapists advocate for are speaking a child's language and meeting them where they are, which is beautiful in play therapy and actually matches very well in the tech world as well.
I mean, it seems like it makes total sense, especially with this new generation of kids that are very plugged in.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned all ages. I'm curious, have you done play therapy with older adolescents or adults?
I have. Yes, it does look different in my experience. With a younger child, it might be more what's called non-directive, where the child is leading. And with older children, teenagers, and adults, it tends to be a bit more directive in nature, where I will encourage them to do something in particular. So, for example, we often use sand tray in our practice. So it's a table of sand, really. And then there are these little toys, they're called miniatures, that we'll play with inside of the sand, and people will build worlds. So if I'm working with a younger child, they might have a little bit easier of a time being imaginative and creating a world. Whereas sometimes my adolescents, my teenagers, and my adults might need to have a little bit of direction of what to do, what to build, some type of prompt to use. And then also with older individuals, there tends to be a lot more talk incorporated in the play. When we're utilizing expressive means, we tend to tap into the aspects of our brain that are more nonverbal in nature. And that's a certain kind of processing that occurs in therapy. And then with talking, it's a different process because there are different parts of our brain that are being activated. So it looks a little different. It feels a little different. But at the end of the day, it's incorporating expressive, creative means in their treatment, which is
Makes a lot of sense. So it kind of lets you get beyond language, which obviously for kids, language is new. It seems to me like it, probably a lot of adults who need a little bit more play in their lives. So
absolutely. I know. There's a saying, work hard, play harder. And I think that there's a point in time in a lot of our lives where we just, I guess, learn that we can't continue to play. I don't know what those messages are. It's different for everyone, but we're not too old to play. We all need to have a little play, a little joy in our lives. So important.
Good. Yeah. In and outside of therapy.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
So you mentioned sand tray therapy. That's something that is analog, not using technology, but you're also an expert in play therapy using digital media. What does that look like using digital tools for play therapy?
Yeah. I mean, digital tools, first and foremost, are an additive to treatment. And what that means is it's not meant to replace the traditional methods that have been helpful. So sand tray is a perfect example. Sand tray has been around for a while, many, 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 many decades. And there actually are virtual versions of sand trays. So just to say that there's a virtual sand tray app. So it's taking what is traditional, what is maybe tangible in a playroom, and incorporating technologies as a different method. So, for example, we might also have a dollhouse in an in-person playroom. And then we could jump onto a tablet into an app. And I know Toka Life World, for example, is a great app that can be used to replicate a dollhouse, but virtually. So I ultimately incorporate different digital technologies, apps, gaming, VR, all kinds of different technologies into treatment to meet my clients where they are, which is the digital realm, and utilizing play in those spaces to work through their difficulties the same way we would in person. It's just using a different method of the same types of tools.
And what are some of the advantages that you've noticed versus, say, traditional talk therapy when working with these clients?
Well, so many times kids will come in and will not want to talk.
Yeah.
Or they are, they feel forced. So I think and that's not all the time, I want to say, and it's not all the time. It's actually really quite admirable how many teenagers, how many children are actually advocating for their own therapy now. So I do want to acknowledge that there has been a shift, I've noticed. But ultimately, if someone's telling you to do something as a teenager, as a kid, you don't want to do it. So if someone's saying you need to come to therapy, that's hard. So to then come and talk about your problems is what they're thinking. Well, I don't have any problems. I don't want to talk about these things. There's nothing for me to talk about. Well, then we're going to sit and stare at each other, right? Like that's not fun for anybody.
Right.
So being able to use a medium that's more comfortable, more expressive, and actually not as outwardly apparent that they're actually working on some of the things they're struggling with. So I like to use examples to kind of bring points a bit home. So, and this is more in a traditional realm, but this definitely fits in a digital realm as well. So I was working with a client once, and I will keep things very vague because I want to protect confidentiality. So I just want to give that disclaimer. But I was working with a client once who was having some difficulties at school, and their parent told me at the start of the session, please talk to them about their difficulties in school today. And at that time, I was a newer clinician. I said, okay. And the client comes in and I said, oh, I heard you had a hard day at school. And they said, no, I didn't. And then it ends there. Where do I go from here? So next week, still having difficulties, I tried something different. This is actually a benefit of play therapy. I used a teddy bear instead. And in the virtual world, we can use avatars. We can use figures. We can use all kinds of different things. But I used a teddy bear instead. And I said, I heard Mr. Teddy had a really hard day at school today. Mr. Teddy's only going to speak to you. Would you be okay with talking with Mr. Teddy today about what happened? And they were on board, totally on board. And then they told me everything that happened to Mr. Teddy, which was exactly what was happening to them. So in play therapy, again, in digital world and in the, I don't want to say real world because I think it's all the real world, right? It's just different aspects of the real world. But in the different realms, kids are able to utilize toys to place their thoughts, feelings, experiences onto the tool. It allows a safe enough distance for them to really work through things outside of them. When things are really close to us, even as adults, it feels like an ego injury, really. Like it doesn't feel good. We want to not appear bad, to other people. We want to seem like we have everything together. So it's harder for us to be open and honest about the things that are really going on. Using something else to kind of put it onto that. Like, it's not me that's having the hard time. It's Mr. Teddy. We can totally help Mr. Teddy. I don't need help though. So play really helps tap into that. And it really fosters healing from a place of a child or human having a sense of control and ownership and able to test different things out without putting themselves out there and being too vulnerable in the process.
It's super interesting. So it's like, I mean, it ticks all these boxes that you don't get with other media, right? So you're able to, you have that safe distance, like you said, which makes it a little easier to go into, touch those sensitive nerves. But then because it's action oriented, this is kind of reminding me a little bit of a fiction workshop I was in grad school. And it was like, thinly veiled, everyone's kind of, working through their issues a little bit, some of the stories that we're sharing. But it's like, it's even a step beyond that where, perhaps those feelings that are pre-verbal, because it's action oriented, it's like, who knows what's going to come up?
I love that you say that, because play therapy. So let me back up. I specialize in trauma work.
Yeah.
So I immediately think of pre-verbal trauma when you say things like that. Now, of course, it's not the case for everybody. And pre-verbally, we all have experiences. Mm-hmm. Our experiences and our perception of the world really form around those early interactions. We don't have verbal meaning to attach onto our early experiences. We haven't learned it yet. So how are we going to equate our experiences as a baby to verbal understanding? It's not stored in our brain and body the same way. Mm-hmm. I love that you bring that up because it's so true. It taps into this ability, or I should say, it provides an ability to tap into the aspects of our psyche, our being, that might not be as easily attainable through language, through verbal language, I should clarify, because play is a language.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's it's kind of its own medium. And speaking of media, digital media, something we were talking about before was this new study that you brought up. I would love to dig into, but just to kind of add some context, I think one of the things that I've found in talking to parents who are very much thinking about what's going on with technology, their kids' use, may or may not be related to mental health. That's kind of a hot topic right now, but just in general, is for a lot of parents, I think there's this temptation to take a very reactionary stance to say, I just want to pull the plug and move to the woods. Nobody can really do that at this point, but the impulse is there. And yet there is this new medium that, affords the ability to communicate, is useful in clinical settings. I don't know, I guess we're still kind of figuring it out. Maybe it's not all bad. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts? Maybe we could start with this, specific example of the study you brought up, but, the positive use of technology when it comes to kids and teens.
Yeah. I want to quickly make a comment of what you were saying about going into the woods. Well, you can buy survival stuff online, but joking and serious. But no, in all seriousness, I think that anytime something new and unfamiliar is introduced, there is fear associated with it. Yeah. Innovation dances with fear. It's normal. It is part of our human history. It will be ongoing for the rest of human history. Mm-hmm. So I want to acknowledge that. And I also want to nurture that. As a parent, you're trying your hardest to make sure that your child is okay, that they're healthy, that they are having good balance in their life, that they are being taken care of, both by themselves and others, right? And when they are entering into these spaces where you have no idea what they're actually doing, or have maybe very little idea of the interactions, of the space, of what they're being exposed to, of course you're going to be anxious about it. Of course you're going to want to pull the plug and run into the woods, right? I mean, again, I know I'm joking, but I am serious about this. I think that it's so important for us to normalize that experience, and as parents, as humans, to give ourselves gentleness and grace and recognize that the intent is to be supportive. The intent is to be protective. And when we don't really know what's going on, of course, the easiest thing to do is just remove it completely. Mm-hmm. And there are benefits. And I think when we are able to really lean into the process and uncover what those benefits are, we feel more comfortable. I have been so reluctant to so many things in my life. I'm fully transparent about that. I was afraid of everything because that's how I grew up. Funny enough, I actually was not allowed to play video games when I was a child because my parents thought that it was, I don't know, I think they thought that my brother and I were going to fight, which we had a very chill relationship. So I don't know why that was the thought, but I think this exact point hits home for them. And again, will continue to hit home for so many families of don't do this because it's going to be bad for you.
Right.
And I ended up here in gaming trying to uncover and express the benefits of it. So I just want to give that caveat. The study that you're referencing, just to let those listening know what's about. So there was a study recently conducted and published about gaming and intelligence. And they found that, well, it was actually there were a couple other variables, but we'll stick with gaming and intelligence just for the purposes of what we're discussing. So they found that above average gaming time actually increased intelligence.
So it's causal.
Yeah. Well, yes, I do want to say that they accounted for a lot of different variables. So I think that's the intent, was it for it to be a bit more causal, but I do want to just note as a psychologist, it is challenging to have some of these studies actually be causal. They're more correlational in nature because there has to be a lot of factors. I won't bore those listening who aren't really necessarily interested in that aspect, but I think that's the way that it was phrased. I think though that it actually leans more towards correlational in nature. I do want to note that in the study, they were looking at 9 to 10-year-olds and specifically published this research pertaining to that group of individuals. So when you see the study, when you see articles written about the study, there is seemingly a general overarching statement of gaming increases, improves, benefits intelligence, which is a factual statement from what they found in the study. I also just want to give a note that it's important to be good consumers of the research. While this research is extremely promising and so much more research about digital technologies and mental health and just overall human wellness are continuing to be conducted, it takes quite a bit of research to really hone in on a more causal relationship understanding. So as I was saying, we don't want to draw conclusions from one article, but it is promising. And this also just is another little caveat to just be mindful of the headlines that we read. We tend to consume the information that aligns with us. This is called confirmation bias, where we confirm a bias that we have knowingly or unknowingly by finding information that reinforces or supports what it is that we think. And then, of course, with computer algorithms, we're going to be fed with advertisements and things that align with what we're looking for. So then we might start to continue to see things in our feeds pertaining to our bias, and we don't even realize. So just make sure anytime you hear any research to do a little bit more research to uncover a more wide range understanding of what the results are.
Can I dig into that a little bit?
Yeah.
I want to go into the gaming stuff a bit more, but this issue of confirmation bias and algorithmically delivered content, I have a hunch that is actually at the root of a non-trivial number of problems that we face, maybe at the individual and more collective level.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've encountered in clinical settings, or do you have any thoughts as a therapist about the intersection of information that perhaps is confirmatory, the types of digital content that people are consuming, and mental health?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts. I think that goodness, I'm trying to figure out where to go. I always say I have a popcorn of thoughts, so if they've just popcorn. So I think I'm thinking several layers in the professional world and in the personal world. So in the professional world, I'm noticing similar experiences where there are connections to various types of information that confirm certain thoughts and feelings. And then mental health providers will provide services according to what they are reading and seeing. Some of it's rooted in fact, some of it's not. So I think that's important to just keep in mind as professionals. What are we consuming and is it accurate or not? I guess to give a little bit more, kind of making it a bit more vague, but I'll give an example. So pre-pandemic, there were a lot of articles popping up about how dangerous technology is, how it's the worst thing ever. I'm being a little exaggerative, but that's basically, the headlines are flashy, right? I mean, that's kind of
like industry publications.
Nope.
Just in general.
Yeah, in general. But I was noticing I appreciate the clarification. Yeah, because I was noticing this in the professional realm, but it was for just general articles for the general public. But I would see so many flashy headlines and people would then start to post them and express concern. But when you actually look more into the articles, they're blog posts, they're opinion based. So I think that sometimes there might be further advancement of panic about technology because of the content that some of the professionals are consuming as well. So that's one level. The other level is with, personal, like parents and just our own general engagement. I think if we're talking about articles specifically, it's the same type of experience. But if we're talking about experience, actually playing these games, depending on the content that people are consuming is going to ultimately flavor the perspective about what's happening. And sometimes that furthers mental health struggles. It's the perception that it's bad. It's so interesting how many times people will come into my sessions and think that they are bad or think that they're doing something in an unhealthy way. And sure, you might need to work through some balance. I get that. I own that. In our work, I appreciate that they're aware of that. And how much of mental health struggle is us thinking that we have struggles? Like how much of mental health and in technology.
So it's almost a self-fulfilling.
Yeah. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's really about perspective. I had someone who came to me and was talking about some information they were seeing on social media. And they're like, do I have this? I was like, let's unpack this a little bit. It's the information that we're consuming that teaches us. We learn about ourselves from how other people tell us that we are.
Yes.
And so if people are telling us that we're bad or this is not good or this is unhealthy, then we're going to think that. Now, of course, I don't want to knock the fact that some of that is accurate, right? There absolutely is unhealthy technology use. There absolutely are things that we need to be aware of, the thoughts of addiction online, the concerns of cyberbullying, of predatory behaviors, of access to content that should not be accessed at certain ages. I understand all of that. Absolutely. Those are things that absolutely need to be addressed. Technology as a whole, though, I think because so many people perceive it in a different way because adults did not grow up with technology the same way that kids did or do. The perception is different. The perception is it's bad. Then the child is taught this is bad. Then the child feels bad when really, it's a cycle.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the case. Sure. Again, balance might be necessary, but it's not.
This is I'm totally fascinated by this. In part, I had a conversation with another guest yesterday where we were talking about this specific issue of being exposed to communities with, certain diagnosis or, whatever online through different social media. And it sounds like there's this, there's a huge amount of complexity around what you just described where because of the reflexive nature of it, it's like the algorithms, it's a black mirror, like literally have a black mirror that's kind of reflecting back at you what you're putting into it. And this is, I would love to get some practical advice from you on this. Because I think a lot of people struggle with this where it's like, okay, I see something that clearly is pulling something out of me where I feel a bit of identification. And in some cases, that's a fantastic thing. Like if you're part of a marginalized group in a local community and you can connect with other people online and develop healthy relationships, that's a fantastic thing. But how can you even thinking about how to discern which feedback loops you actually want to put your foot into and which ones maybe you want to hit the brakes?
Yes. And how to properly navigate that, right? How can we tell if things are accurate or inaccurate? I'm thinking about social relationships, right? Or safe or unsafe, thinking about different, digital realms. So there's so many layers that still need to be uncovered. I think it's really being good consumers of technologies. I think it's instead of spending so much time and energy on fearing this space, I think it would behoove us to spend more energy on leaning in and understanding this space so that we can navigate it as best as possible. If most of the warning to kids and teens is this is dangerous, stay out of the dark corners of the internet. Okay, that's helpful to know. Yes. And there's so much more that needs to be provided to our society, to our species about this realm so that we can navigate it in certain ways. It's synonymous to the DARE program when I was in school. It's, there is, and for those who are listening, it was a drug program at school that
the Nancy Reagan's thing, right? Or no, that was Just Say No.
Oh, I don't know.
I
just remember DARE.
Okay.
I paid attention. I remember things. But I ultimately the message there was fear, right? When lessons are rooted in fear, it is ineffective because you have the people who were me, who go to one side of the spectrum, who are afraid of everything. And then you go to the other side of the spectrum where people are like, oh, this is dangerous. Let me go and do this. Right. And that's just human nature. That's just who we are as humans. If we don't receive the correct guidance, we're going to continue to have these polarized experiences. And that's what is happening. We as a society are having so many polarized experiences. So I don't know. I might have taken this a little further than the question you were asking, but
I don't know. This is great.
To be able to connect with people and be mindful of the lessons that we are having in this space that are flavoring our perspective and ultimately our interactions.
Yeah. I mean, I think this area is something that's going to be continuing to evolve as the technology evolves because the gray area is so big. I do want to make a call back to, there was a phrase that you used a couple of times that I really liked, which was uncovering the benefits of technology. Like, it's just like perfect verb, right? It's like this participatory kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it made me think, for parents who are listening or trying to figure this stuff out, maybe you're like, okay, maybe it's not black and white. Maybe there is some gray. What would it mean for them to take that first step to uncover those benefits?
Co-play. And what I mean by co-play is playing with your kids, entering into the space with them, because the more you understand it from their lens, the more you're going to be able to help them from your lens. But if we are approaching children from our perspective and they do not feel seen, heard, and understood, it kind of discounts some of the things that we're saying, right? Because if someone is talking to us and we don't feel heard, we're going to be less likely to listen to what they have to say.
Right.
And that's exactly where kids are. So when you lean into the process and you show interest and engagement, you uncover so much. It is fascinating how much I have learned about my clients in the digital realm. Fascinating. Like, I'm getting chills thinking about some of the things and some of the work that we've uncovered. And from an outsider's perspective, it looks like we're just playing. And that's kind of like a funny thing that play therapists also talk about. Like, we're not just playing. Like, I know it looks like that, but to a trained eye, there's so much more going on. But anyway.
Let me stop you there. What's like a memorable, what's something that comes to mind where you got those chills?
Yeah. So I was playing Roblox with a client and I got stuck behind a ladder. And we're in the middle of session. This is, by the way, this is like a timed game, team game. I feel immediately, personally, that I'm letting my team down, which is my own stuff. Okay, I own it, my own stuff. But start to panic, and then I'm like, okay, Rachel, chill. Like, this is for your client. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
But I said, uh-oh. Client's like, what's up? I said, I'm stuck behind a ladder. And they stopped what they were doing, which they are very competitive and always want to be first. Stopped what they were doing, came over to help me, so kindly navigated me out. And I'm telling you, like, first off, I'm not the best in some of these gaming spaces. I try. Okay. So that's part of it. The other part, it really was hard. Like, I was really stuck. But anyway, not about me. So my client helps me out. It was a really helpful experience. They were able to help me with an experience that I was struggling with, going back to the projection. They were struggling a lot of that time with things that they were navigating. So to be able to step into the role of helping me, and it's not about me, it's within the play. We're in the context of the play. But by being able to have that sense of empowerment, they were able to work through what they needed to work through in terms of confronting scary, stuck experiences, right? So The game ends, they get second place. Now, they would typically have very extreme outbursts when not winning, being first, being the best, very goal and achievement oriented. They were not even upset. They weren't upset at all. And we were able to process that verbally of what that meant to pause and work on something else, or to, obtain resources or support others, even though that didn't make you first, it still did help you recognize how to navigate challenging experiences. You can still be successful and not be first. And you can still work through difficulties and not be the winner at the end of the day. And that doesn't make you a loser. And I think that lesson, I don't think it was so readily apparent, like we're talking about it now, but I think that was the message that was conveyed in that experience. And the child did start to have improvements in their high achievement experiences at that time. Now, I don't want to say that was the only thing that did that, but I would imagine it helped pretty significantly. But in that moment, I always tell therapists this, in that moment, I got into my own head. I was like, I don't know the space. And this is something that's really important to know with parents too. We don't know these spaces. So part of us feels incompetent because we don't want to lean into this space and not know what we're doing. And either in therapy, provide therapy services that are not rooted in, competence. From a parent, we don't want to enter into this space and get frustrated or, not know how to figure things out. We start to get into our own heads. But when we connect with our children or other people in this space, it's more about the relationship and less about our own experiences. Right? When I got out of my own head, this is not about me right now. Like, this is 100% about my client. This is their session. Like, I know that I got stuck and I feel bad. That's my own stuff. I don't want to let the team down. That wasn't what the session moment was about. And a lot of times I think people stay stuck there. I'm stuck, right? They just get right into their own head and body versus saying this is an experience. So that's a little snippet of one powerful encounter that I've had.
Even as you were describing it, like the way I was picturing this in my own head is like this very embodied, rich experience, right? And I think probably what I could imagine be pretty difficult is making the connection between what you just described, which if you tried to do that in the real world, I don't even know how you would recreate that kind of experience that gets you the same results. I mean, just practically difficult, very expensive. I don't know, you have this kid run a Spartan race or something. I
would need a bunch of other people to be on the team because this was a whole team, a live team experience. I mean, we were on the same team and we were working together, but we would need to have a whole team of people to do this.
Yeah. And it's, it's extremely rich. It's emotionally activating.
Yeah.
You get those insights. But as somebody, if you've never played a game before and you just see two people staring at a screen, seemingly hypnotized,
right.
Making that connection is not intuitive.
Yes. And this is all about perspective, right? It goes back to perspective. When we are viewing the black mirrors from an outside, we're like, you're just staring at a black mirror. When you're inside of the black mirror, though, there is so much there. It is an entire world that people have no idea about.
Yeah.
Because we see the black mirror, it's dangerous. So I think going back to co-play, play with your kids. It's not going to only benefit your kids. It's going to benefit you too, because full circle of this conversation, we have to play also. We need to have time where we can be fun and free and enjoy life. Life is so stressful and serious. Play. That's your homework assignment from me.
I love this. I mean, packing a lot of insight, I think right there, and practical stuff for parents too. If your kid's playing Roblox, take an interest.
Yes.
And it sounds like don't let don't let the ego get in the way.
Yeah.
Because the kid is the expert, right?
Yeah. The kid is the expert, 100%. And that is so important in my work, is looking at the child as the expert and recognizing as adults, kids have so much to offer. They know so much more than we think they do. They just might not be able to articulate it in the same way that we do. But when we're able to enter into a space where they're able to thrive in their communication to us about what they know, about how they're problem solving, it is eye-opening and fascinating and just the coolest.
So this is kind of a fun question I've been asking the guests recently, which is, given that these experiences are becoming more compelling, you mentioned virtual reality, which it sounds like you're using in clinical practice. that's now starting to gain some traction. It does seem like perhaps this time is different with the hype curves where people are buying the headsets. Who knows what Apple's coming out with at some point. We're going 2D to 3D. It does seem like generally these digital experiences are becoming more compelling, more affordable, more accessible. So one could imagine that 5, maybe 10 years in the future, it could basically be feasible that you spend almost all of your waking hours in the metaverse or whatever we want to call it. What's the case for reality once we get to that point?
Yeah, I think that reality is in the Baha'i. Reality is in the eye of the beholder. I like to mix words together sometimes. So ultimately, how we see the world is through our lens anyway, no matter what the platform is. Right? And our reality is not necessarily absolute reality. So I think it's super important to just keep that in mind first and foremost. Having different platforms for reality just enhances our ability for reality. I think technology is absolutely a cognitive evolution. We as a species continue to evolve throughout time. Given the context of the time, we just evolve with the time, right? And the time now is the digital era, and there is so much potential. So I think that reality, sure, will absolutely shift. Reality is already shifting because of technology as a whole. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I also think when hearing that, people might start to panic, like, oh, we're just going to be like simulations. We're going to live in this world. I think constantly coming back to a place of balance, recognizing what's a healthy balance for you, what's a healthy balance for your family, and just what's a healthy balance for all of us. I think that our reality is going to be created in a way that aligns with us. And I think that it is kind of dangerous to qualify that as all bad or all good. And I think that sometimes is where people immediately go, oh, this is going to be introduced when radio was introduced, when film was introduced, when movies were introduced. Well, I guess it's the same as film. But anyways, when new things are introduced, it's always met with resistance because there's this fear of the unknown. And change is inevitable. Unknown is inevitable. And I think really leaning into the reality that aligns with where humans are is where we're going to go. And we will shift and continue to find balance is my thought and hope.
I think you said evolution, cognitive evolution. It just made me think there was a very long time period where language did not exist. And then all of a sudden monkeys started talking to each other, and it completely changes the way that we perceive that base level reality. So there is sort of almost something there. I think the concern that folks would have, and I personally sort of have this concern, is if those things somehow become untethered, you're purely in the world of kind of imagination or self-oriented virtual environments. Is something doesn't quite feel right about that.
Absolutely. And this is exactly why we all need to lean in, right? I don't like to tell people what they need to do. It would benefit us to lean in. Maybe it's a better way to say that. But I think that ultimately this is the way that we are going. So at one point or another, we are going to have to lean in, or we're going to stay on the outskirts. And if that works for our lives, then that's great. But ultimately, eventually, we as a human species are going to evolve into this space in whatever way that may look like. So being an active participant at the start can help us create clear parameters, can help us with our boundaries and balance. If we close our eyes to it and we're like, this is not good, this is not healthy, we're not contributing to the betterment of it. It's inevitable. It's there. If we like it or not, it's there. So I think being that active participant is really of utmost importance.
Continuing to charge forward and uncovering those benefits.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this conversation. I wish we could talk for like another 3 hours. We'd love to get you back on the podcast. Just so people know how to connect with you. You do have, you're on a bunch of different digital channels, websites, social media. The best way for people to connect with you is beacons.ai/DocVader, and we'll put that in the show notes. And then in terms of that study about gaming increasing intelligence, we'll link in the show notes. Anything else people should know about?
I think I already emphasized playing, but I'll just give that. I'll give that one last little try. Make sure you take time to play. I know we have very busy schedules. Life is stressful, and that's all the more reason to make sure that you're taking time to play. And just be kind to yourselves. I think it's easy for us in this world to be hard on ourselves and to, I think I'll just leave it at that. So just make sure that you're being kind to yourself. You're giving yourself compassion and gentleness in this newness too. Like it's a lot. You're navigating a lot. So just make sure that you are nurturing yourself in the process.
It's a great way to close. Rachel, thank you.
Thank you so much.